Okay, good. Good evening, everyone, and sorry for the late start, both online and live. I just want to make sure the one of the areas I'm struggling with in trying to engage with this Shane Rus is the challenge of looking at the macro and the micro, and we're sort of on occasion reading to psukim and making diukim in nuances of the language, and on the other hand trying to bring out big themes. So I just thought I'd start off by summarizing, I hope, the big themes that have emerged so far, and try and contextualize the big themes that I hope we'll look at today. And then hopefully out of the little micro details of the psukim that we're looking at and the macro details, somewhat coherent a picture will emerge of what I'm trying to draw out of Sefer Rus in these few shiurim. The big micro theme that we started with, which I'm not going to go through again, is that Rus is about transition periods in Jewish history, the chaos of Ishayash Enov of the Shoftim, and the transition to Malchus. And Rus explicitly is authored by Shmuel, who is the transition figure, the last of the Shoftim, and also the first of the Nevi'im who coronates the king. The Megillah explicitly starts off with Vayhi b'mei Shvot HaShoftim and moves to Malchus at the end, the foundation of the Davidic dynasty, and ultimately Melech Mashiach. A second theme which we will touch on today is the subject of Chesed. It's a family story, Rus, but it seems part of the message of Rus is that if you want to rebuild a society that's become horribly corroded and corrupted in the era of the Shotim, you need to get back to basic values like Chesed and family dynamics. We saw how in Shoftim, there's incidents which suggest that the Jewish people have almost descended to a Sodom-like behavior. And in some respects, the story of Rus confirms this. You have the leader of the Jewish people running away to, of all places, Moav. Moav, who is the offspring of Lot, the offspring of Sodom, and the refugee from Sodom. Moav, who doesn't greet the Jewish people with lechem and mayim when they're in need of hospitality as they're traveling through the desert. And this is where Elimelech and his sons go to retreat. We're now, though, at the cusp of the turning point in the story. And the argument is that Rus is a story of repair and return. Malchus can only occur, kingship can only occur through a process of restoration. If the essence of a king is, and we saw this language, is somehow to act as the libo shalom, the heart of the people, and bring everyone together, the king has to emerge from a process of repair and reconnecting and rebuilding. And Rus, it's no coincidence that she's a Gures. It's no coincidence that she's a convert from, of all places, Moav. So she's as distant and as foreign from what should be the most basic national characteristic of Chesed that we're meant, but don't always live up to, but we're meant to possess. It's no coincidence that that's Rus, that is the heroine of the story. And we're going to spend today looking at her Geirus. That's going to be one theme that we look at today. And secondly, it's no coincidence that the story revolves around the story of Yibum. And the end of the story, we know, is going to be a performance of a Yibum of sorts. Really, there's two episodes in the Torah of Yibum. One in Rus, in Tanakh, one in Rus, and one with Yehuda and the whole Tamar story, which again we'll revisit. There's two episodes of Geirus in the whole of Tanakh, really on a significant level. The story of Yisro and the story of Rus. So again, one of them features in our Megillah. So we're going to look at, we looked last week at Yibum, touched upon it, and we're not going to revisit that for this week, though we'll revisit it in a future week. This week, we're going to look at the Geirus of Rus, and also this week, it's going to be time for us to introduce the co-hero of the story, who's Boaz, and we're going to try and understand a little bit about Boaz. So that's going to be our topics for today, just to give people the big picture, even though we're going to spend some time looking in detail at Psukim. The concluding pasuk, I think, that we looked at last week is an almost laughable pasuk. It sounds like bizarre to the extreme, but of course it isn't. This is the pasuk in Tanakh. So let's turn to our Megillas Rus, in which Naomi turns to her daughters-in-law, Rus and Orpah, and she says to them, why are you staying with me? Am I going to bring you children that you can then marry? And it sounds almost as if she's saying, the reason I think you're staying is because you're still hoping for me to have children. You know, your shidduch went so well last time when you married my two sons, that surely what you're looking for now is a remarriage within my family. But where do you think that's going to come from? That was Perek Aleph, Pasuk 12. Shovna v'nosai, Shovna v'nosai, Lechna, return my daughters, go, ki zokamti miyos ish. I'm too old to marry again. Ki amati yesh li tikva, gama yisi alayla ish v'gam elad divanim, that you should say, even if I were to say there is hope for me, even if I was able to be remarried tonight and give birth to sons, halahen, to saberna, adashe yigduru, halahen te yagena. Are you going to remain agunas? Are you going to remain waiting until they grow up? So it sounds like she sort of thinks they're staying because they want to reconnect. And this posuk sounds bizarre in the extreme, except that is what happened. That is, in a sense, what not Rus is going to do, because Rus is going to reconnect to Naomi's family in the process of Yibum. And we saw that in the process of Yibum, Rus, and we'll look at this a bit more today, Rus pays the most extreme sacrifice imaginable, because the essence of Yibum is almost submitting your identity to the identity of your in-law family and carrying on to the family line. And we saw the very last pasukim in the Megillah, in which this child born to Rus, in some ways, is more the child of Naomi than of Rus. And that's what a successful Yibum indeed looks like. But that's not a simple thing to do. It's the ultimate, in a way, of chesed. Shalames is the ultimate of reconnecting a broken chain, a broken link. That's what Yibum is. Okay, so this is where we were up to last time. What I'd like to do is maybe continue looking at Rus's attempts to turn her daughters-in-law away, and then look at Rus's rebuttal, Naomi's attempt, to turn her daughters-in-law away, and then Rus's rebuttal of this, and we'll spend a little bit of time looking at the Gerus process in so doing. So basically, Rus makes 3 attempts to turn them away. Attempt number 1, in which Naomi again makes 3 attempts to turn them away. Attempt number 1 is unsuccessful. Neither Arpa nor Rus go back. Attempt number 2, Arpa goes back. Attempt number 3, Rus resists, and then Naomi gives up. And this is where we get the concept of turning away a candidate for Gerus 3 times. Let's have a look here at Pasuk 13. So Rus, this is the continuation of Rus saying, what are you hanging around for? Do you really think I'm going to have a child? And even if I do, are you going to remain as Agunas for that long? And the end of the Pasuk says, Al Benosai. So this is the end of Pasuk 13. It's worth looking at inside in your copies of Rus. Al Benosai, know my daughters, Kimali ma'oid mikem. For it is very bitter for me, mikem, from you, kiyotza vi yad Hashem, for the hands of Hashem has gone forth against me. What does it mean? Kimali ma'oid mikem. It is very bitter for me from you. So it's an unclear phraseology, and I mention this just because we're also trying to learn the Megillah. We need to understand Pshat, and in understanding the details of Pshat, nuances come out which help us on our journey. Why is Rus here? What's the argument? Why is she saying that she wants to push them off? So it could be she's acting out of kindness and sympathy for them. Note that she calls them Benosai, my daughters. So she feels very close to them. Al Benosai, she says, no, my daughters. So this is a loving phrase. In which case the translation would be Kilmali ma'oid mekem. It is too bitter for me from you. In other words, why should you share in my fate? I'm in a terrible mess because my life is a devastation. I'm going back husbandless and childless, but you've got your lives ahead of you. Why should you embitter yourself from through me? It's too bitter for you. But what's the literal translation of Mali ma'oid mikem? It is bitter for me from you. Yeah, on your account. It does sound like it's bitter from you. I'm actually now using an art scroll Chumash, which I know it does translate it as what's the translation it gives? On your account, on account of you, yeah. On your account, mikem, from you. I hadn't seen that art scroll translation. I've seen it in the Midrashim, which say that she may be blaming them for what happened. Very interesting. She may be blaming them for what happened. You're the cause of the bitterness. How would they have been the cause of the bitterness? The husbands died. You killed my sons because you were unsuitable.
It's actually pointing that out because you are my daughters. That's why all this is.
This has all happened because of the family connection, right? Lovely, yes. So benos are my daughters because you were never fit to be members of my family. There may be what's going on. It may be she thinks they're being self-serving. And this may be what she's saying when she points out the ridiculousness of them hanging around. And she says, what do you want from me? Am I ever going to have children? She's worried that they're not lishma. She thinks they're just hanging around for her. There is a medrash which suggests she may be embarrassed about them. The last thing she needs, if she's trying to go back to Eretz Yisrael and restore her tattered reputation, does she really need her Moavi daughters hanging around with her? So maybe that's what's going on, that she's embarrassed about them. They're the lingering shame of her family and a reminder of her family's terrible, mistaken connection with Moav. Okay, so this is the penultimate attempt. Orpah indeed goes back and Rus stays on. I'll just mention one textual analysis in Orpah turning back. The pasuk describes in pasuk Yodalet, pasuk 14, Vatisena kolon vativkena od, they lifted up their voices and they cried further. Vatishak Orpah lachamosa, v'Rus dov kaba. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and Rus cleaved to her. What's the difference between kissing and cleaving? Rus kisses, Orpah kisses her mother-in-law, and Rus cleaves to her. By the way, the Gemara refers to the descendants of Orpah, amongst whom the most famous is Golios, as Bnei Hanashukah, the descendants of the kisser, and it refers to the descendants of Rus as Bnei Hadavukah, the descendants of the cleaver, the one who cleaves. So I'm not going to get too far into this story, but we know that Orpah and Rus's descendants meet again in the famous encounter of David and Goliath. And Goliath is the champion of Plishtim. David as the first king of the Jewish people, not yet the king, but this is through the acts through which ultimately he sort of wins his kingship, beats Goliath, and with that almost closes the era of the Plishtim who denied the legitimacy of Jewish rule, and you now start the period of the Malachim. That's almost the transition from Shoftim, the chaos of the judges, to the order of the kings. So there's two things I would point out as a difference between cleaving and kissing. The first is that kissing is with the mouth. It's a degree of connection and contact, but it's a very limited one, as opposed to cleaving, which is a more holistic type of connection. The second difference is there is a grammatical nuance in the pasuk, in which Orpah's action is described with an active verb vatishak Orpah lachamosa, she kissed, whereas Rus's action is described with a passive state of being. V'Rus dovkaba, Rus cleaved her. It doesn't say vayidbak Rus lachamosa, Rus cleaved to her mother-in-law, but it says Rus dovkaba, Rus cleaved within her, even though in English we translate both as to her, but the language is very different. So an ashika is, the verb used is that of an action. Orpah does an action, whereas for Rus it's a state of being. That seems to be the difference between their relationship. For Orpah it's a mouth, it's a kiss. For Rus it seems to be a whole holistic experience, whole body, whole person experience, and therefore Rus succeeds in staying, and Orpah is sent off. I want to now turn to, with that introduction, to amongst the most amazing. Again, it's not for me to comment on the beauty of Pesukim and Tanakh, but certainly I think many of us read these Pesukim, and these are amongst the most amazing Pesukim in Tanakh. Vatomer, Rus pasuk 15, Naomi turns to us and says again, Shuvi achrei v'imtech, this is her third and final attempt, follow your sister-in-law. Vatomer Rus, and Rus says, Al tifki bi. What does Al tifki bi mean? Don't treat me or don't press me. If we think again back to our Sefer Bereshis, amongst other places where we find this verb, we find that Yaakov is vayifka b'makom vayolen sham. Yifka pigia can either mean he encountered the place, in which case it's got a sense of poga, means to nifga, means to bother someone, to chapper someone, to irritate someone, to press someone. Or vayifka b'makom means he entreated Hashem at that place. The Medrash understands it. It's interesting when we read that pasuk, we think of the Midrashic interpretation is that he davened, and the Pshuto Mikra is that he just vayikam he arrived at the place. But the Medrash is translating that Pekira as entreating. So here, either al tifkabi means don't bother me, don't hit me, don't confront me, don't encounter me, don't resist me, or al tifkabi means don't plead with me. So either she sees Naomi as pleading with her and perhaps coming from care, or she sees Naomi as pressing her and challenging her, perhaps coming from an attempt to push her off. And then she says, Ki elasher telchi eleich, ukasher tolini olin, amich ami verakayich elokoy. That where you go, I will go. Where you live, where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people are my people, and your God is my God. Then Bashet Musi Amos, where you die, I will die. For Shomakova, there I will buried. Chaos Hashem Lidaka Yosef. So Hashem will do with me, and so he should continue. Pasuk 17. Only death will separate between me and you. So this pasuk is immensely interesting. It's pasuk's an exceptionally moving pasuk. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will bury it. It's a powerful statement of love. What is Rus's motive for wanting to continue with Naomi? And if we understand these psukim from a halachic perspective, that this is teaching us about the process of gerus, what is this telling us about the gerus process? What is this telling us about conversion? So, yeah.
Be like a fully immersive thing, like everything. I accept everything.
So it's definitely telling us it's immersive. It has to be accepting of everything. Chazal, by the way, understand these psukim somewhat halachically. This is a Gemara in Yevamos. Where you go, I will go must refer to the halachas of going. Where do we have halachas that limit how far we're allowed to go? Tchum Shabbos. So that's what the Gemara in Yevamos says. This is Tchum Shabbos. Where you sleep, I will sleep. That's the halachas of there's appropriate places to sleep and inappropriate places to sleep. The halachas of Yichud. Your nation will be my nation means I'll be bound by all the 613 commandments. Your God is my God. I'll accept. Chazal seems to understand that to mean your based in is my based in. I accept authority. By the way, Elohim doesn't necessarily mean Hashem. It can also mean the justice system, the based in. Elohim, Yavod Vashaneim. So it could be the Gemara of Amos' understanding, not your God is my God, but your based in is my based in. Where you die, I will die. The laws of Kavura, that different people are buried in different places. A Rosha is buried in a different section to a Tzaddik, etc., and so on. So it could be Chazal almost understanding this halachically. So it's holistic, it's halachic. It seems that to be Niskaya, you have to be joining the Jewish people. Let me explain what that means. You could think that Gerus means I'm accepting upon myself halacha and belief in Hashem. Who says it means anything about joining the Jewish people? Right? Are these two separate things or one? It's not the time now to discuss this, but when we ask ourselves the question, what does it mean to be a Jew? It's not clear. Is being Jewish a national identity, and also that we happen to accept Hashem and the Torah mitzvahs? Obviously, as Jews, we're mechuyev in the Torah mitzvahs and belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But is it also a national identity? I mean, there's French people and British people and American and Italian, and there's also Jews. You can be a Jew and not keep halacha. You're mechuyev, obligated to keep halacha. That's clear. But is there a national identity separate from halacha? Can you have someone who binds themselves to the 613 mitzvahs and belief in Hashem, but doesn't, in so doing, want to be part of Am Yisrael? And can you be part of Am Yisrael without accepting the 613 mitzvahs? Could you have a citizenship sort of as part of the Jewish people without accepting the Torah mitzvahs? No. Can you accept the Torah mitzvahs and believe in Hashem without becoming part of the Jewish people? You could have imagined, yes, why not? We're a religion and we're a people. But this pasuk is again saying not like that, and it's again very clear in the halachas of Gerus and the Rambam. That means becoming part of the Klal Yisrael, and this is also what we see here in Rus. This is an exchange of identity. She's now becoming Amich Ami. She's now becoming part of Klal Yisrael. I mean, interestingly, also in these pasukim, very interestingly, she only mentions Elokayich Elokoi, if we're going to Sasni, Pshutei Shel Mikra, near the end of the pasukim. She first says Amich Ami, And before that, she says, what at least in Pshuto Shel Mikra are expressions of love. Again, have a look at Pasuk 16 and 17. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Now, we would have thought that the first stage of Gerus is acceptance of mitzvahs and acceptance of emunah. And obviously, it is true that these are absolutely essential in the Gerus process. Yet, again, perhaps mimicking Matan Torah, it seems to start off with it being a relationshipal process, which then translates into belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here again, let's just remind ourselves of the psukim in Matan Torah, in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to the Jewish people, and before the sort of emunah, Ikrei emunah, he says, "So Israel, Atum isem, I shall see in Mitzrayim. You see what I did to Mitzrayim. The Esther Eschem al come in Shorim. I carried you on the wings of eagles. The Ove Eschem line. I brought you to me. The Atum into Shemo Tishmu Bekoni. Shematim is Brisi. Visam Nisagula. Kinikol Oretz. Then the Atum Tiyilim Amnachas Konim V'Kol Kodesh, etc. So Kodesh Baruch Hu seems to be turning to the Jewish people when they're about to enter into the bris, the covenantal relationship with them, and he says a version of what Rus says. He says, I carried you, I looked after you, I went with you. Now, if you see that relationship and you have emunah in me and you accept the mitzvahs, then you can be for me my people. You can become Am Yisrael, you can become Am Hashem. So it seems that the first stage in becoming Klal Yisrael, both for us when we formed our connection with Hashem, and for Rus as she goes through her process, is a relationshipal one of becoming part of Klal Yisrael, that relationship of love, entering into the bris, and obviously that means that that's followed by a kabbalas ol mitzvahs and and emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, obviously. Agav, incidentally, we paskin lahalacha, and the Rambam brings this, that at some point, and the Rambam brings this as amongst the first things we say to a ger, you should know, this is the Rambam in Hilchos Sorobiyah, chapter 14, where he speaks about what Gerus is. He said you should know that Klal Yisrael are persecuted and harried and suffering and so on, which on one level, the simplest understanding of the Rambam is this is part of trying to put off the potential ger, similar to Rus when she says, "Why are you joining me? My life is very bitter. Like, do you think you're going to get anything good from it?" It sounds like in the language of the Rambam, though, that this is also part of what we're saying, that you're joining Klal Yisrael. In other words, you should know that you're joining Klal Yisrael, and therefore you're going to be part of this experience, which currently is that of persecution. You're going to be part of our national story, part of our national journey. So again, this is also part of what Rus is saying to, what Naomi, is saying to Rus. She's saying you're going on a journey with me, and that journey is going to include the suffering, not just as a way of pushing off, but that's what it means. That's the essence of joining Klal Yisrael, that you're accepting the toichacha, which is as much part of the bris, the awful psukim of persecution and suffering, are as much part of the bris as the good times that we'll have, and as much part, that is all part of the relationship. So if you're joining Amich Ami, then you have to have all of that. The Rambam, by the way, carries on and says, Im Omar Yudea Ve'eni Kadai. If the Gerus candidate says, I know, and I'm not fitting to join the Jewish people, then that means immediately they're out on the process. In other words, a recognition of modesty. It's interesting again that Rus does say this later in the Megillah, when she turns to Boaz, and she says to Boaz, I'm even less than any of your maidservants. Maybe we'll look at these later, but the first time she encounters Boaz in chapter base, she says in Pasuk Yud Gimel, chapter 2, Pasuk 13, Vatomer emtsachem menecha Adoni, my master kinichamtoni, you've comforted me. You've spoken to my shifchasecha. This is chapter 2, Pasuk 13. And I am not even as worthy as one of your maidservants. So Rus also seems to indicate this mitzvah of Einik Hadai. I'll state one final ha'ara, or point, which was not my own point, but I saw in this book that I've referenced a couple of times. in which he points out that the two scenarios of Gerus both involve in-laws joining families. Very, very interesting. Rus, who is a daughter-in-law, and Yisro, who is a father-in-law. And he suggests in a very interesting metaphor that in-law relationship is a good way of thinking about what Gerus is, of how someone can join a family without having been born into a family, how you sort of marry into a family. Just interesting. I don't quite know what to make of that point, so I have to take it further, but I saw you mention this book and it hit me as interesting that the two parshas in the Torah that both involve characters with similar names, by the way. The key root letters of Yisro are the Vav Tov Reish, and the key root letters of Rus are the Reish Vav Tov. I think we spoke at the beginning about different attempts to understand what this Reish Vav Tov root means. Is it linked to Re'iyah because there's a clarity of vision that Rus has? Is it linked to Sisa, to trembling because she has a Yiras Shamayim? Is it linked to a thirst? To become a convert, you have to be thirsty for something, right? To turn over your life in such an incredible way and give up everything that one's got and rebuild a new life. There has to be an exceptional thirst. So does it come from the root letters of thirst? It's interesting that both Yisro and Rus have the same root letter words to their names. Perhaps again the Chazals linking them perhaps in that way. Okay, so what we've learnt here is the process of Gerus. And it seems that the essence of becoming a ger is joining other people, and I think tying in also to the theme of chesed that we've seen emerging from this Megillah, because essentially what Rus is saying to Naomi is, I want to join because I want to do chesed with you. I want to be that provider of chesed for you. Now it's interesting, a ger cannot convert, at least for ulterior motives. It has to be lishma, but legitimate within lishma is a desire for chesed, because chesed is not a ulterior motive. It's not a conversion for selfish needs. I want to marry the right person, or I want wealth, which are all less than ideal motives for conversion. But rather, this is an ideal motive for conversion because chesed is one of the mitzvahs of Klal Yisrael, one of the mitzvahs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's a path or a route to connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this isn't an ulterior motive. This is a lishma, part of the family of sort of spiritual goals of legitimate reasons to want to become a gieris in the case of Rus. Now, I want to tie this in to a deeper theme because I want to start connecting some of the pieces, which is that again, this is Rus who's emerging from Moav, emerging from Lot, emerging from Shoftim, in which a Sodom-like tendency has occurred, emerging from the family of Elimelech, who in a time of famine have deserted the people and run away to Moav, and she's excelling in the middle of Chesed. And all rebirths and renewals have to come about through the middle of Chesed. Chesed is the motivator for restarting. When we look at the creation of the world, it's Olam Chesed Yibonu. The world is created through kindness. We see the world is created through an act of undeserved kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has everything. What would he need from us? By definition, it's he's an uncaused causer. He gives, and it's an act of going beyond, giving out existence. All creation is a gift. We are given the gift of existence. By definition, we can't earn the gift of existence. It has to be, the starting point has to be something given to us. And that's the essence of creation. However, this is only a stage one, because the stage two has to creep in, which is now, can you deserve your own existence? Why does the stage two have to creep in? Because it's nice Hashem giving us existence, but then we are mere passive receivers. We are robots. That's no true existence. Received existence isn't existence. There's no me here if I've just received. If the greatest gift Hashem can give us is that of being, there's a me here, there's an I, and I can say me, there's a paradox here because you can't give that to someone. You can't give existence to someone. It's self-contradictory. And when you try and smother someone with gifts, they rebel against it. They feel squashed. They feel deprived of their essence. Even when you're not trying to smother them with gifts, just in the process of giving them life and parenting, they feel smothered. A 2-year-old toddler has to stamp its foot and exert independence, or it can't grow into a healthy adult. A teenager has to also stamp their feet and exert independence. Otherwise, they can't grow into healthy adulthood. So I have to be myself. So here we have a paradox in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Olam Chesed Yiboneh. He wants to give us the gift of existence. However, when you give the gift of existence, it can't remain like that, or it ceases to be existence. It becomes soul destruction. It becomes negative existence. I don't exist because I'm nothing. I am but a mere puppet of you. And therefore, Bechira has to be given, free will has to be given. And now people have to earn their own way. So the greatest gift Hashem can give us of existence is the gift of the possibility of us earning our own existence, of potential existence. Actual existence can't be given, only potential existence can be given, which is the gift of free will, so that we can then earn our own existence. This is what's at the heart of creation. And this is at the heart of all Bechira and all rebellion. And I want us to understand this. This is the heart of Lot saying to Avram, I've grown up and I've seen the kindness in your home, but now I want to separate from you. I want to go my own way. I want to be parade. I want to separate from you because I want my own space. And this is the heart of an Esav who emerges from a Yitzchak, and this is the heart of Adam Arishan, rebelling against Hashem. Adam says, "You've given me all of Gan Eden. I have to have that one fruit." And God says, "Yeah, I definitely have to have it. I deliberately have to have it because I'm feeling there's no one there." So the bechira, the choice we always make in life is, am I going to be the childish 2-year-old? Am I going to be the childish teenager who rebels just for the sake of rebelling? Or am I going to find a healthier way of expressing my sense of self, which actually is the wisdom to accept that which I need from others, to graciously accept that which I need from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then find my identity in using those graciously feeding arms of gifts to build myself and to do good with them. So that's the choice that we all make in our lives. That's the choice that ultimately Adam and Lot made in their own ways, and Tzaddikim make in a different way. And this is now really the introduction to the next stage of the Megillah, in which Rus has had this sort of Onam Chesed Yabana. She's made that outreach of Chesed and kindness, but now there's going to be the question of where does this go, and how does she actually build? Because Rus is going to end up again cheating and getting to the end of the Megillah. She's going to end up as an Aim Yisrael. That's the point. She needs to end up as a mother. That term is used by Dvorah and others, but she needs to end up as Aim HaMalchus. She has to be a creator. So this is the next journey that we're going to go on, in which we see how she deals with things. By the way, Chazal very, very interestingly pick up on this word parader. I don't quite know what to make of this, but again, I'll just share this with you. Rus turns to Naomi. We've learned now pasuk 16 and 17, and she says to Naomi, "Amich Ami and these beautiful words." And then she says, "Ki amoves yafrid beini v'necha." Only death will come between me and you. Ki amoves yafrid beini v'necha. Avram turns to the ancestor of Rus, who's Lot, and he said to him, "Haloi kol haaretz lefnecha." All the land is in front of you. Separate yourself from me. So there was a rupture that occurred at the dawn of history, where Avram and Chesed fragments from Lot and Sodom. That's where Lot heads off to. And now that fragmentation is being repaired by Naomi saying, "There's not going to be a praiser. There's going to be no separation." Very, very interesting. Chazal. And I've never understood this Chazal till I was learning Megillah this time. They refer to Rus as a prader, as a good separator who breaks off from Moav. And I've always wondered, this is a Gemara in Baba Kama Daf Lamed Ches. The Gemara is a Medrashic Gemara. It's commenting on the Psukim in Devarim Perik Beis, in which the pasuk says, "Al tate sa'as Moav," don't oppress Moav, right? So there's a halacha in Sefer Devarim that we shouldn't oppress Moav, and the Gemara asks why Moshe would have thought so and so on, and then it discusses why not. And Hashem answers Moshe, and he says, "Don't oppress Moav because shtei preidos tovos yesh li lahotzi mehen." There's 2 preidot who are going to come out from Ammon and Moav, Rus HaMoaviyah, and Naamah HaAmmonis, who's the mother of Shlomo. We're not going to go into the wife of Shlomo. I'm sorry. Who we're not going to go into her personality. That's another story, another episode in Tanakh. But there are 2 descendants of Ammon and Moav who are the ancestors of Moshiach. And I never understood why Chazal describe them as prados, two prados that are going to leave you. I think the answer is in this pasuk, in which Lot leaves Avraham with a preda, and Rus says to Lot, says to Naomi, there's not going to be a preda. That would appear to be the explanation of these psukim. Okay, I want to jump ahead because I don't have to linger too long. The story continues that they indeed go back to Moav, to Eretz Yisrael, I'm sorry. And if we look very quickly in Pasuk 19, they go together and they get to Beis Lachem, the end of Pasuk 19, and everyone says, Hazois Nami, is this Nami? By the way, interesting language. There's so much beauty in the Megillah that we don't have time to explore here. It's really worth noting the language. Hazois Nami, what does the word Zois mean actually? Is this Nami, right? In Lashon HaKodesh, this is the wrong pronoun to use, or is it called a pronoun this, or it not called pronoun this? Whatever it is, yeah, okay, look into the grammarians. You should say, is she Nami, right? This is the word used, Zois is used for an object, not for a subject. For subject, you say he or she, right? Who or he in Lashon HaKodesh. Hazois Nami is objectifying her, right? So again, there's a distance from Nami, there's a resentment Nami, they're not really connecting with her. Pasuk 20, we'll spend a little bit of time on this pasuk. Vatoma alein, Nami says to them, Karanali Nami, don't call me Nami. Karanali Mora, call me Mora. Ki heme shakai limaid. The shakai shin dalid yod, the name of Hashem, has heimar limaid. We normally translate this as heimar limaid, has embittered or been bitter against me. Excuse me, I still have a lingering cold. From the word of mar, and there's another possible etymology of this word, other than mar. Anyone hazard a guess? Mar memresh smura. To exchange, yeah. Yes. Can you get this cup? Sorry to bother you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. I just want to get up from the screen. Okay. So there is another possible etymology over here of heimar limaid. Means Hashem has has, maybe I'll wait a minute. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, sorry. Wonderful. Thank you. Quick halacha exercise. Why did I not say a bracha on this cup of water? No? Weren't? I wasn't drinking for thirst, drinking it just for lubricating my throat. Yes. The halacha is, if you have a medicine, you don't make a bracha. If you have a food, but you're having for medicinal reasons, you do say a bracha. So if you have chicken soup because you believe it will cure you, wrongly or rightly, I have no idea. But if you believe it will cure you, you say bracha because it's a food. However, water is not like that. Water, if it's drunk just to lubricate the throat, we don't say bracha on it.
If you're having small amounts on a fast day, then
yes,
would that also fall into that?
If you're having shiurim because you need to drink in order to sustain yourself, then you're having it for sustenance. Then you would indeed say a bracha on it. And you wouldn't be allowed to have it for lubricating your throat, normally speaking. So yeah. Okay. So we've had a little aside. So Rus pasuk Chaf pasuk 20. Naomi turns to the people and she says, "Hey, Mashakali Moed, Hashem has embittered me, or Hashem has substituted me." If you look at the next pasuk, you can see why it might mean substituted. I left full and I'm returning empty. So she may be saying, "I've been substituted, I've been switched." Just a couple of brief comments on the name of Hashem that she uses over here, Shin Daled Yud, Shakai. What's the meaning of this name, Shakai, and why does she use it over here? Everything is crafted, obviously. She deliberately uses the name. And we're not entirely clear what the meaning of the word Shakai is. It's very interesting. The Maramokim, the source for those who are interested in the sources, is two places where the Mepharshim talk about this significantly. One is in Bereshis Yud Zayin Aleph, where Hashem appears to Avraham and says, Ani kel Shakai. The second is at the beginning of Parshas Va'era, Hashem turns to Moshe and he says, I appeared, Va'era Avraham etc. I appeared to the Ovois with Kel Shakai, with the name Shin Dalud Yud, or Shmi Hashem, but my name Yud Kevavke, known to them. I didn't make known to them, so I wasn't known to them. So that's where the Mepharshim speak about the meaning of the name. One etymology of this is from the word, Ibn Ezra says this, is from the word power. There's a rather unpleasant word which is similar to Shin Dalud Yud, which is shoded, someone who's a bandit or a powerful robber, someone who steals by force. So this is, I think, the common translation where Shaka is translated as Almighty comes from the Ibn Ezra. In which case she's saying Hashem has powerfully dealt with me, or maybe even looted me. Like Shakai means shoded, someone who's a robber or a looter. Hashem doesn't steal anything, but he's taken everything away from me. So he's a shoded. A second etymology of this, which is the Rambam in Mo Nevuchim, is that it's linked to the word die, enough, that Hashem is self-sufficient. He is self-contained. He doesn't need anyone else. So this then would refer to a distance that Hashem has from us, in which Hashem is somewhat aloof from us. And he says, I am self-contained, I'm absolute existence, as opposed to you who are dependent on me, in which case that would be the idea. There's a third explanation in which this is a nurturing word. Rashi says it's linked to the word dai, which means enough, dalad yud, like dayenu. Shedai li l'chol beria, there's enough for me, for all my creatures. In others, I have plenty for everyone. It may be linked to the word shodayim, which it refers to the breasts or the nurturing element of motherhood. So it may be a reference to nurturing, that Hashem is a nurturer. In which case she's saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's normally the nurturer and who has sufficiency for everyone, he's taken everything away from me. So very interesting, different nuances as to how to translate this phraseology. But even so, this is what she says. We'll look at one more pasuk of this part of the story, and then I want to still use the remaining time just to visit Boaz, who we need to encounter. Let's just finish this pasuk. Ani Milei halachti, pasuk 21. V'reikam hashivani Hashem. I left full, and Hashem has returned me empty. Lama tikve'enali nami. Why are you calling me nami? V'Hashem onobi. Hashem has onobi. So here the words ayin nun hey either means Hashem has testified against me, in which case she is admitting guilt. And she's saying, Hashem has testified against me. He saw what I did, and he's recognized that I was wrong. Or Hashem honor me that Hashem has afflicted me. And again, it depends on the grammatical forms of this word and exactly what it means. What I hope comes out of this is that Naomi is not an entirely guilt. She's a Sadekas, right? At the end of the day, she's viewed as a Sadekas. She ends up as an adoptive ancestress of Mashiach. She's a great person. However, she is not entirely blame-free for everything that's happened. According to Ibn Ezra, at this point in the pasuk, she does teshuvah. She recognizes that Hashem has testified against her, and that's a teshuvah because she recognizes there's the justice in what happened. She's not bitter. She's bitter. She says, "I'm embittered, but not angry against Hashem because I recognize this is payment." She was one of the parties, after all, who went off to Moav, and therefore she's somewhat responsible for it. But either way, in that context, this is her teshuvah. I want to spend the last few minutes just dipping into the character of Boaz, so that we're ready for next week and ready to move on, because we've spent a long time on their travels and Naomi's return, and we do need to go on with the rest of the story. Pasuk, chapter 2, Pasuk Aleph, I'll just give a moment of literary analysis, and then we'll step back from that. Just for those, just since we're learning Nach, and we rarely get the opportunity to do this, just a sort of structural point. Nach often has a narrator's voice, the author's voice, effectively. Who's the author of these psukim in Nach? On one level, Shmuel. On another level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because this is part of Nevi'im. So this is again, we've discussed on other occasions, I'm not going to go through this here, as to what the relationship between a Novi is and Hashem, and what the difference is between Torah, which is dictated by Hashem, as opposed to Nevuah, which isn't quite the same level. But either way, the author is Shmuel acting as a Novi, and therefore on some level expressing the words of Hashem. So Chazal sometimes refer to these anonymous voices as a buskle. And this is a heavenly voice always coming out. And this is a very good example of where you can see this, because the pasuk here doesn't really structurally fit in the story. So they've arrived, again, let's contextualize the beginning of chapter 2. They've arrived, where are we up to? Naomi and Rus have arrived back in Eretz Yisrael, bitter and impoverished, and they settle in Beis Lechem. Maybe I should have mentioned the very last words of chapter 1, at the beginning of the barley season. That's how, right at the beginning, we identified that this whole story takes place between Pesach and Shavuos. Pesach is the beginning of the barley season, Shavuos is the beginning of the wheat season. Then it says, Naomi moida leisha. Naomi has a relative through her husband. Ish Gibar Chayed, a strong man, Mishpachas Melech, or Shmo Boyaz, and his name is Boyaz. Then the story completely leaves Boyaz. Boyaz is irrelevant to the next look. Rus says to Naomi, I'm going to go and I'm going to glean. And she goes and she gleans. And she happens to turn up at Boyaz. Boyaz is really, it becomes an active player in the story in Pasuk 3. In Pasuk 1, it's really, Rus and Naomi are just talking to each other, and she says, we need to make some panasa. I better go and clean, otherwise we don't have anything to eat. Pasuk 3, we encounter Boyaz. What Pasuk 1 is telling us is, it's giving us some background and context. There is someone around called Boyaz. Boyaz really only needed to be introduced in Pasuk 3 when they encounter Boyaz. A more efficient way of telling the story would have been, they settle down. Pasuk base is the start of the chapter. Rus says to Naomi, how are we going to survive? I better go and clean. Pasuk Gimel, she goes and cleans. She happens to end up in the field of someone called Boyaz. And now I will let you into the secret. Boyaz is a cousin of Naomi's husband. But that's not the way the Pesukim go. And Chazal pick up on this, and they say that this is telling us that this is a key turning point in Boyaz's life also. And therefore, I just want to use this Pasuk as a sort of a linchpin for us to just reflect a few moments on Boaz's character. The first thing is that Chazal seem to understand that Boaz is a pen name for Boaz, because Chazal identifying him with one of the shoftim called Ivtson. We already mentioned that earlier when we were trying to locate the story of Rus in the history of the shoftim. In which case, Boaz is some sort of adopted name. Now, whether Boaz is or isn't an adopted name, we've seen that Chazal consider the names of the characters in Megillas Rus to be critical, to be very, very important. The root of the name Boaz seems to be Boaz, in him is strength. Which sort of strength is Az? Chutzpah. Az is probably best translated as impetuous or a cheek. However, Az kanome, be as cheeky as a leopard, the Mishnah in Ovis says. Now, a leopard is not the strongest of the animals. However, in this metaphor being used, it's the most chutzpahdik of all the animals, because despite being weaker than some of the other animals, it will take on targets much bigger than itself. It's got a certain power to it. Uzus isn't always a good thing. And uz ponim is a chutzpahniak, a cheeky person who doesn't know their place. Uz ponim negehinnim, someone who doesn't recognize their place, it goes to Gehinnom. So Boaz is someone who's possessed of the ability to have a type of strength that allows him to go against convention, go against what everyone thinks is right, go against assumptions. It's almost a revolutionary name. It's a name of someone who can create a revolution. And where do we see Boaz creating revolutions? Marrying Rus. Right, the plain Almoni is the sensible one. He says Rus is unmarriable. She's a Moaviyah. She can't enter. Boaz argues against that, and he says, no, I can marry Rus. And Boaz goes against the consensus. We'll see in a moment that Boaz has a vision for a society gone very badly wrong. And we'll conclude, we're going to run out of time shortly, with what that vision is. But for now, we're just mentioning that Boaz is a revolutionary. There's an amazing Gemara in Baba Basra that says that at this point in life, Boaz has lost everything. It's almost a bit reminiscent of the Eve story, actually, interestingly. I'm not going to go into the Gemara and where the Gemara gets this from, but the Gemara says that Boaz had 60 children, and on one day, the day that Rus arrives in town, his wife and all his 60 children die. Now, I want to spend a few moments just talking about how we learn Medrash and what to make of this Medrash. But either way, this is what the Gemara says. So Boaz he's lost everything. And the continuation of the story now is particularly moving, because at this point he feels completely helpless, you can imagine. He's lost everything. And yet, this is really only the beginning of his life, because he's going to marry Rus soon in the story, and they're going to have one child, and maybe only one child, and out of that child will become David and his whole continuity. So it's quite an amazing type of story going on over here. Now, there are certain key numbers that whenever you see in Chazal, you need to understand that they're telling us a message, and often these are giveaways that they don't mean this number to be understood literally. For example, 40. 40 is used whenever it comes to creating a new structure, a new existence. There's 40 days of the Mabul, there's 40 days of Matan Torah, and Moshe was up there for 40 days to get the new creation of the world. There's 40 years of wandering in the Midbar, which is the incubator period for Klal Yisrael to be born. 40 days of Yetziras HaVlad, from when a fetus goes from just being Maya Ba'alman Halacha, from just being water, to having the status from conception to 40 days on. It doesn't have a status of a fetus. At 40 days it becomes a fetus. So 40 is a symbolic number. And the Meraglim, of course, wander around for 40 days. 40 is a symbolic number in Chazal's thinking. 60 is a very important number. Where do we know 60 from? Most commonly in Halacha, by the way? Bottle B'Shishim, yeah. When something is less than 1 in 60, it leaves no trace of it. When you have 1 in 60, when you have a 60th, you've just got a taste of it. It's just the cusp of having a taste of something. Chazal, for example, say sleep is 1/60th of death. Why would they use that number of a 60th? They're saying it's a taste. It's just got a little taste of it. They say a dream is 1/60th of Nevuah. Why are they using the number of a 60th? Saying it's a dream, but it's just got a little trace of Nevuah to it. So in the context of this discussion, 60 is the fullness of life. He has 60 children, and he's left with none of them. What's that saying? He's left not even with a trace or a lingering remembrance or a lingering memory of what he once had. There's nothing left of it. So again, we don't know what Chazal mean in the story. Why this? Chazal discussed why this happened to a very interesting episode, which I'm not going to go into now. We don't know exactly what the Chazal mean when they use the language of metaphors, when they mean things literally, when they don't mean things literally. But what they are telling us for the purpose of this story is that Boaz is ripe to create a revolution. Everything is going to be turned over through the personality of Boaz. He's Boaz. He's a person of great strength. I'll tell you one very, very interesting thing, and then we're running out of time. No, maybe we'll have time just for me to say 2 more interesting things. The first very, very fascinating thing is that there is a pasuk in Melachim which says that there are 2 pillars, that Shlomo Melech established 2 pillars to support the Beis Mikdash, Yochin and Boaz. Is this familiar to you? 2 pillars, Yochin and Boaz. It's familiar because the commentary on the Mishnah, the Yochin and Boaz, right? There are people often none. Okay, Yochin and Boaz. What's the word Yochin mean? Lahachin or kain. It means stability, right? To be established. So one pillar of the Beis Mikdash is stability. The other pillar of the Beis Mikdash is Boaz, named after, or the same name at least as our Boaz, which means azus, change and revolution and so on. It's very interesting when you think about the balance that one needs to find in one's life. Of whenever one wants to make a revolution, you need to ask: is it Yochin? Is it established? Is it in line with Masorah? Is it in line with tradition? Is it in line with halacha? Is it sensible? Is it reasonable? And so on. Whenever you're Yochin, whenever you're in, let's just keep doing this because this is what we've always done. And I think ask yourself: is it Boaz? Am I being bold? Am I missing something? Maybe I need to think a bit out of the box. It's very interesting. These are the 2 pillars that are used to establish. Let's just jump ahead and look at one more pasuk, and with this we'll finish for today. We started a little bit late, so forgive me if we're going over a little bit late. And this is an amazing pasuk. Vinay Boaz bar Beis Lechem, pasuk Dalet, chapter 2, pasuk Dalet. Boaz coming from Beis Lechem, Vayomer lekotzim, and he says to the kotzim, Hashem imachem, God should be with you. Vayomer lo, and they said to him, Yovarech Hashem, Hashem should bless you. Now the Mishnah comments on this, and it says, what sort of things going on over here? Boaz is using the language of Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hashem imachem. That's how you greet people. And they reply, Yovarech Hashem, may Hashem bless you. This is a terrible Chilul Hashem. The pasuk says we're meant to fear Hashem's name. We're not meant to just casually use Hashem's name. And the Mishnah answers on this an amazing idea. And it says this is a time of Eis La'asos LaHashem, Heiferu Sarasecha. There is a time to do for God, Heiferu Sarasecha, null his Torah. there are occasions, and this is a very, very dangerous principle that needs to be applied with enormous care. I'm not attempting to explain this whole principle, but there are times where a great leader can slightly warp normal practice because Eis Lasos Hashem, it's a time to do for Hashem. There's desperate needs, demand desperate measures. And again, the exact parameters of how far you can go. Obviously, this sounds like a profoundly antinomian or against halacha. I think it needs a lot of careful application. But the Mishnah gives us an example. So Boaz says this is a time of desperate lack of awareness of Hashem in our lives. I need to reintroduce an awareness of Hashem in the world, and therefore I'm making a gezerah, takana rather, that people should greet each other with Hashem, Yavrechu Hashem, and people should greet each other as he did with Hashem Imochem, an amazing thing, so that people will have the words, the name of Hashem, Shogor B'Piyam, that they'll refamiliarize themselves with Hashem being regular in their lives. When I did a Q&A here recently in the shul, I can't remember how it came up, I said that I think people at this time, when people ask you, how are you, when you speak to colleagues, when we're living in an age of such materialism and such, unfortunately, people should say, God bless, thank God, and so on. We as Jews should get used to using the name of Hashem, and we don't say Yod Kei Vav Kei, but we should get used to using the name of Hashem. The Rambam Peish Mishnayos, by the way, says, this is the source of the practice of Shalom Aleichem and Aleichem HaShalom. Because Shalom is one of the names of Hashem. It's a kinoi, but it's the name of Hashem, peace. When we say Shalom Aleichem, what we're really saying isn't just peace be with you, but we're saying God should be with you. So this is the continuation maybe in a diluted form, maybe not in a diluted form, of Boaz's practice. So I just want to say 2 points here, and then I'll stop. The first point is, here you see Boaz as the revolutionary. This is Boaz, one others of Eis Lasos Hashem, Hefeiru Torasecha. Which leader has a strength, a dangerous strength, it needs careful application. I'm not suggesting this should be widely applied, but of annulling the Torah, because you see there's a desperate time needed. Another example of this in history, there's only a handful of times in history, is the decision to write down Torah Shebal Peh. Torah Shebal Peh is not meant to be written down, the oral Torah is meant to be remain oral, but the decision was taken to write it down so the Torah wouldn't be forgotten. It's like a handful of times in history such a thing has happened. Boaz is one of this unique cadre of handful of leaders in the whole of Jewish history who have this chutzpah of making a revolution for Hefeiru Torasecha, Eis Lasos Hashem, because it's the time of Eis Lasos Hashem. That's the first point. Second point that I want to make is, I've seen this Mishnah many, many times. It's a very well-known Mishnah, very, very interesting Mishnah. I never stopped to think, why in Megillas Rus of all times does Boaz think we need to do this revolution? I never stopped to think, what is this telling us about the Megillah? It's not just telling us something about Boaz, it's telling us something about the times. In the whole of Jewish history, the only time we find a leader feeling people are so desperately with Hashem out of their lives that he needs to create this revolution, it's him, Boaz. And what Megillah is taking part in? This is where I'm now joining all the dots again. The Megillah where it's the closing of the era of Shoftim, where Sodom-like incidences are happening, where people are forgetting basic chesed, where a vulnerable Moyaviyah Giores turns up, and were it not for a Boaz, she would have been abused by the workers. What a terrible time in Jewish history. When there's an expulsion of chesed, when there's no king be Yisrael, and Mishayasha Be'enov, you arrive at a place where there's this is Jewish history, where a Sodom story happens, whereas we learned in Shoftim, a vulnerable stranger turns up in Shevet Binyamin and isn't given a host, where a mob surrounds the home like Binyamin. The story of Rus has a terrible element to it. It starts with an Elimelech who flees when there's a famine and goes to Moab of all places, and it continues with a little series that we don't really notice, in which a vulnerable Gioris is being persecuted by Jewish people. What a horrible incident. And Boaz is the hero that says, I'm not going to let this sit, I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to defend Rus, and ultimately I'm going to marry her, and only after that Mashiach can come. And part of this project is Boaz realizes, Hashem Imochem, we have to start using the Shem Hashem a little bit more, even though it involves Hefeiru Torasecha, there's no choice, Eis Lasos Hashem. So again, I go back to our original title of the series. I argue that Rus is a time of change and transition, it's a time of revolution. And here we have a little incident where we see that revolution. The only time in Tanakh where we see that such a phraseology is allowed of Eis Lasos Hashem, of Hashem Imochem. So we'll finish for today, and we'll carry on next week by looking at this a little bit more in detail. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and I wish you all a good evening. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Dayan Zobin.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really excellent.